Okay, now we're going to go ahead and start to install Linux onto our machines. We're going to take a look at 3 different installations. We're going to first take a look at the Yggdrasil distribution, and then we're going to take a look at the Red Hat distribution, and then we're following that with the Slackware distribution. What is common in all 3 distributions is that it's my responsibility to install Linux onto the machine, and I need to know exactly what equipment that I have. So, for this demonstration, I have a 486 CPU by Intel in this machine. I have one of the new IDE CD-ROM drives by TIAC. I have a 3.5-inch floppy drive, and I have a 400 megabyte hard drive. I have a video card. The video card that's in this machine is by Diamond. It's a Diamond Speedstar. And I have a monitor that I'll be using here, a high-resolution Super VGA monitor. Now, I need to know all of this information to go ahead and install Linux onto my machine. I also need to know what type of mouse that I have, and in the case of this machine, I'm using a Microsoft compatible mouse. And it is your responsibility what hardware that you have available and the information concerning that. You can find that information in the specifications and manuals that come with your system. If you do not have a manual, you'll need to go ahead and call the supplier or call the provider or the manufacturer to find out the information as you're going along. So let's go ahead and prepare your system for installation of Linux. Now, it doesn't matter which version of Linux that you're putting onto your machine. The concerns are all going to be the same for the initial install. First of all, I recommend that you put separate partitions, that you partition your hard drive into separate partitions for the various operating systems that you have. Now, it is possible to put Linux onto your system on top of your MS-DOS and not have to repartition. However, there have been some problems noted when people install Linux on MS-DOS, and I do not recommend that you do that. So therefore, I recommend to go ahead and bite the bullet and to repartition your hard drive. Before you repartition your hard drive, it is wise for you to run some utilities such as scan disk and defrag, which will defragment your hard drive, and then use some type of backup utility to back up the contents of your on-DOS and Windows or whatever operating system that you're using. And then at that point is to go ahead and reformat and repartition your drive. Now, if you're not familiar with how to do that, you can check any MS-DOS manual to tell you how to use the MS-DOS F-disk program to partition your drive. So, I'm going to assume that we have gotten that far. We have backed up our hard drive, and that we're going to go ahead and partition our drive and make certain decisions about how we're going to install Linux. The first thing that I want to do is I'll enter fdisk. Currently I'm in DOS, and I'll go ahead and type fdisk, and I'll go ahead and I'll show what partition information that I have. And at the current time, I have one partition set aside for DOS. I'm using 25% of the disk. In other words, I set aside 100 megabytes for MS-DOS. And that's what I have. The rest of the disk I'm going to install Linux on. So let me go out of here. And I'm back in DOS. First of all, I'm installing the Yggdrasil distribution. I'll insert the floppy disk into the floppy disk drive, and then I'll insert the supplied CD-ROM into the CD-ROM drive. Now what I need to do is simply reboot the machine by hitting Control, Alt, and Delete at the same time. Now I've restarted the machine by hitting my Control, Alt, Delete button, but you can either use Control, Alt, Delete, or you can go ahead and hit your reset button. And you'll boot up, and the first thing that you'll see is the screen introducing the Yggdrasil Linux product, and there's a lot of information that is presented to you on the screen. Basically, what you can do is you can press the various F keys to get all your options that you can view of what you can go ahead and enter for options. And you might want to investigate these options based upon what type of hardware that you have. For example, if I had a SCSI system, I'd go ahead and press F2 to see what SCSI options are available. In my equipment that I'm demonstrating here, I have an IDE CD-ROM drive, so therefore I'm going to press F3 to bring up those options. Here I can see that if I want my IDE drive to be recognized, I'll have to say that HDB equals CD-ROM. The reason why I say HDB is because HDB is the second disk, the slave disk, and that's how I have my IDE CD-ROM drive set in this machine as the slave drive. So I'll go back to my main screen. Let's take a look at F4, the options available for the non-SCSI and the non-IDE CD-ROMs. These are very popular drives out there. We have the Sony CDU31, and this also takes care of the 33A CD-ROM drives. We have the Sony CD535 drives. We have all the Sound Blaster Pro compatible CD-ROM drives. We have the Mitsumi and the Gold Star and the Philips and the Aztec drives. And this screen shows you the command line options that you need to enter. Now, if you don't enter any option at this point in time, what happens is the Yggdrasil distribution will try to determine to the best of its ability what options, what hardware you have on the machine. Now, to speed up the search, you can go ahead and enter some of the information, such as, for example, back on F4. By experience, I happen to know that the Sound Blaster Pro CD search takes quite a bit of time to accomplish on the machine. So one of the little tricks that you can learn to do is that you can enter some of these parameters, say SBPCD, which stands for Sound Blaster Pro CD. I can set that equal to 0, which will turn off the search for that. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Okay, so my command line, the first command line always begins with the word Linux. And then I hit a space. And now I'm going to turn off the Sound Blaster Pro CD search. So I'll do SBPCD equals 0. I'm also going to turn off the Mitsumi CD drive search. as another example. So I do an MCD equals 0. And I'm going to tell the machine that my CD-ROM, the IDE CD-ROM that I have in the machine, is located as my slave drive. In other words, my second hard drive, or as a slave. So I'll type in HDB, which means that's my hard drive B, or my second hard drive, is equal to CD-ROM. And that's how I tell the system what's going on. Now I can key back and forth between all the various options. For example, I can go to F4 and notice that I can see what the proprietary non-IDE, non-SCSI CD-ROM information is, but it'll still keep the lines that I typed in, the command line, still on the screen, and I can enter information. So I can go back and forth between the various options, like here's the IDE controller options, or I can also go back to the main screen by just hitting F8. So that's enough information for us to go ahead and get started now. So I'll simply hit enter at this point in time, and the machine will go ahead and start looking to see what type of hardware that you have. Currently we're loading Linux. You're going to get a lot of information out onto the screen. You can follow along with that information is. You really don't have to be concerned with a lot of it. For example, right now, because I didn't say that, ignore the Aztec CD-ROM drive, it's doing an Aztec CD-ROM search, but that doesn't usually take that long. So therefore, we're just going, this is just all informational, information being presented to you. There's not really much to be concerned with. You don't have to do anything at the present time. Really, this information is valuable to you if, for some reason, your system, you can't get it up and running and you need to get some tech support. Perhaps the person that's providing tech support to you will ask you certain information from these screens. Otherwise, just sit back, relax, and ignore this. Now here's the first screen that becomes important to you as a user. Right here is where you get to log into and begin either the installation of Linux, or you can take a look to see what is available in the Linux. So the first thing that you need to know is that here's where you type in either demo or guest or root or install. If I type in demo, I will see a demonstration of some of the capabilities of Linux under the X Windows system. When I type demo, I'll be asked for certain information such as the type of mouse, the type of video card, and the type of monitor that I have. And that way the machine can figure out how to set up the X Windows system to show you the demo. Guest, if you log in as guest, you'll be able to explore and experiment with the system to a limited ability. If you log in as root, you'll be the super user, and you can do certain systems administration at the time. But what we're primarily concerned with is the first time install. So at this time, we're going to type install. We've hit enter. And now we're going to be prompted for certain information. Here we have the welcome screen. It tells us that we can abort the installation at any time and exit by pressing escape. So otherwise we're going to be using the up and down arrows, and we're going to be using the arrow keys to navigate through the list, and we'll press space to toggle on and off options, and we can use the tab key to select between the various options at the bottom of the screen. So we'll go ahead and say OK here by pressing the enter key. The first screen that you're going to see is it's going to ask you what type of keyboard you would want that you're using. For this demonstration, I am using a United States keyboard. But if I wanted to change keyboards, all I'd have to do is navigate up and down with the arrow keys. And for example, if I wanted to select Danish, I would go to that, and then I'd press the space key. Notice that the indicator has moved, saying that I want to install a Danish keyboard. So let's go ahead and make sure that we go back to the United States. I'll hit the space key at this time. And now my keyboard will be for the United States, and I'll go ahead and press OK by hitting the enter key. Here I can name my system. We're going to go ahead and use the default name Linux here. However, you can name your system whatever you like. For example, foobar, whatever you perhaps want to enter your system domain name here if you have a system domain name. Okay, here are some of the install options that we have that the Yggdrasil distribution presents you. We can auto mount our CD-ROM drive on boot. We can activate the guest account. We're going to go ahead and use the default options that are available here. But if you want to, for example, you can navigate down using the arrow keys down to make boot floppy. Just go ahead and toggle on by hitting the space key. But we're going to just use the default options. So we'll hit OK by pressing enter. Now, this informs us that we're going to install a minimum 10 megabyte plug-and-play Linux configuration onto our hard disk. And we're going to install everything except for what's under /usr. So the first thing that we're going to do is partition our hard disk. And we're going to designate the partitions for the root, also known as the slash file system. And optionally, we're going to put on the swap and personal directories, which come under the home partition. That is optional. However, I do recommend that you do that. I recommend that you minimally have a root file system, a swap partition, and a home partition. So we'll go ahead and proceed by hitting the enter key. So now it's asking if we should now partition our hard drive. It's telling us that, and we should create a root partition to hold our files, as well as a swap partition and a home partition for our personal files. So it's going to run fdisk on /dev/hda under Linux. all of our devices are under a /dev directory. HD means hard drive, and A is the first hard drive. HDB would be our second hard drive, and so on. So we want to run, because we only have one hard drive in here, on our first hard drive, which is /dev/HDA. That's where we want to run our fdisk on. Now this is not the same as DOS's fdisk. This is Linux's own fdisk. So we'll go ahead and begin the partitioning now by pressing OK. Now here's an informational screen. It's saying that we're running fdisk on /dev/HDA. Once again, this is our first hard drive. We can press M for help. M means menu, and I'll do that now. Press M and enter, and I can see all the different options that are available for me under Linux's fdisk. Let's go ahead and print out what the partition table looks like at the present time. That's P. And when I hit P and enter, I get back the information that /dev/HDA1, that means hard disk A, our first hard disk, 1, the first partition. I can see that under the very last column to the right, that it is a DOS 16-bit system. So in other words, I have DOS as my first hard drive partition. What now I want to do is I want to add other partitions so that I can install my Linux on. So as I can see above, N will add a new partition. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to press N here, hit enter, and it's going to be a primary partition, so I'll hit the letter P, indicating primary. Then it's going to ask which partition number do I want to set. Now be careful here. If I hit 1 here, I'll wipe out my DOS partition, so I have to be particularly careful here. My Linux partitions are going to be 2, 3, and 4. And I have to remember that. So I'll enter partition number 2. Now it comes up with what my first cylinder I want to start my Linux partition on. I always start at what the first cylinder listed is, which is 205. Next, it wants either the last cylinder or the size in megabytes or kbytes, which is megabytes or kilobytes of memory that I'm going to be taking up a hard disk space. So I have decided that I want to set aside 280 megs for my Linux root partition. I recommend that you have at least 200 meg for any Linux system that you're going to be installing on. You should at least reserve 200 megs of root partition. So what I'll do here is I'll enter a plus, and I'll hit 280 capital M for megs, so 280 megs. Now I'll hit enter. Now if I hit M for help and I press P for the partition table, we can see that we have HDA1 is a DOS partition and HDA2 is a Linux partition, and of approximately 280 meg in size. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is I want to add a swap partition. The swap partition, the recommended size for a swap partition is twice the amount of RAM that I have in my machine. In this case, I have 16 megs in this machine, but what I really don't really need to have that large of I don't need to have a 32 meg swap partition in here. So what I'm going to do, just for demonstration purposes, is I am going to put in a 10 meg swap partition. So I'll hit N for new. It's going to be a primary partition. It's going to be partition 3. Remember, 1 is DOS, 2 is my root Linux partition, and 3 is going to be my swap partition. My first cylinder is 774, and I'm going to say that I just want a 10 meg swap partition. Like I said, it's a good idea for you to go ahead and set up to have a swap partition size twice the amount of your RAM. Okay, so I want to have my last partition. My last partition is going to be my home partition. This is where I keep my private files, non-system files, just files for my users. It's also going to be a primary partition, and this is going to be primary partition number 4. So my first cylinder is 795, and my last cylinder, it's okay because this is my final cylinder, my final partition that I'm going to be entering here. All I need to do at this time is just to hit what the last cylinder is. So in this case, it's 826. Now if I look at the partition table, I can see that I have HDA1 as a DOS partition, and HDA2, 3, and 4 are all Linux partitions. If I take a look at my help for fdisk, I can see that W stands for write table to disk and exit. What I'll be doing here is I'll hit W, which means to write the partition table out to the hard disk and exit back to the installation program. So that's what I'll do here. You can ignore the reboot to ensure the partition table has been updated message. The syncing disks means that it's making sure that the disk information is synced. And now we're put back into the installation script. And the first thing it asks is, where do we want to have the root partition put on? And it has by default /dev/HDA2, which if we look, that was exactly where I wanted to have the root partition. If it was some other partition, then you could go ahead and edit this and make that the root partition. But this is, I'm happy with this, so I'll go ahead and hit enter, and that'll be okay. This next screen, it's asking us to set up our swap partition. Now the swap partition is used basically for administrative purposes for the Linux operating system itself to use. It uses it to swap in information and out information, such as virtual memory and etc. Things like that. And that's what the swap area is used for. The larger the swap area that you can go ahead and set aside, Linux is going to go ahead and use it efficiently. Like I said, once again, the recommended swap size is approximately twice the memory that you have on board. However, for this purposes, for this demonstration, we've set back just a 10 meg partition. Our next partition that we're going to set up, like I said, is the swap partition. It's asking us which is the swap partition, and I need to enter that now. It is /dev HDA3. Be very careful as which one that you're designating as what. We've already set up HDA2 as our primary root partition. Now we're setting up HDA3 as our swap partition. If you were to type in some other partition except for this one here, such as HDA1, we would overwrite our DOS partition. So we have to be extremely careful when we're entering these parameters here. So I'll press enter, And it's asking us which one that we would like to have as our home partition. And it's defaulted to HDA3, but that was our swap partition. So I need to correct this. I need to backspace and I'll hit HDA4. Once again, that's hard disk drive A, which is our first hard disk drive. And this is partition 4, and that's going to be our home partition. Press enter, which will activate the OK. So it's saying here that it cannot mount our home partition, and should I run mke-2fs on it? What that is, that's a utility to format that partition. E2fs stands for the second extended file system, which is the default file system that Linux uses. So what mke-2fs does is it formats the partition to be a Linux partition, and all data will be destroyed on that. And of course, we're just installing it, so that'll be fine. So we'll hit OK and return for yes. And now comes some more information screens. It's just telling us that it is, in fact, formatting the hard drive, partition 4. So it has set up our swap space for us. It has run mke-2fs. In other words, it has formatted the hard drive for us. And now it is asking what type of system do we want to go ahead and put onto the hard disk at this time. Later on, we're going to be adding and maybe possibly even removing we're going to be adding packages later from the control panel. At this time, we're going to go ahead and enter the recommended packages. We hit the enter key, and with a lot of activity from our CD-ROM drive, we're going to go ahead and start. The CD-ROM will transfer information to the hard drive. Here's another screen that is going to show the activities that are happening. It's going to show that we have a bar graph, and it will show how much of the system that we have that we're installing. And it's informing us that in case it takes long enough, the screen blanker will come on, will blank out the screen. Don't be concerned. Just reach over and hit the shift key, and the screen will come back on. Okay, we're back, and we can see that the installation has come to its completion here for installing the base system at this time. And now it's going to go into the configuration of the kernel. And now it's going to go into the installation of all the software packages under the recommended that you chose earlier. This is going to take quite a while. So go ahead, relax, and get a cup of coffee, perhaps a good book. And I would highly recommend the Yggdrasil Bible. Kick back and read it, and every once in a while you want to check in on on this. This could take like perhaps an hour. It really does depend upon the speed of your system. So like I said, take a relaxing break now. Okay, now we're back from the installation, and now we're creating some symbolic links, and this is going to take a while. The symbolic links are done now, so it's telling us that to remove the boot floppy so that we can reboot the system, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I've taken out the boot floppy, and I press OK, and the system is now going to reboot. It's sending the information that it is terminating processes that are going on, and now the system is going to reboot. Here it reboots into its BIOS checkup. And here we are, we are booting up to our boot selection here. This is known as Lilo, or the Linux loader. I could select from which partitions I wanted to boot from. For example, if I would have typed HDA1 there, which is the first partition, we had DOS on that partition, and I would have booted into DOS. However, I didn't do anything here, and it just went ahead and loaded into Linux automatically for me. Now, if I want to, I can go ahead and change the boot order so that it will go ahead and boot into DOS for me by default. I can straighten all this out in a file called the Lilo, that's Lilo, .conf, that's CONF file, the configuration file. And in the Lilo conf file, I can set the order of which operating system do I want to go ahead and boot by default. So right now we're going ahead and once again it's going through checking the system. It's going to find our hardware and it's going to boot for us. And our CD-ROM is mounted. And now it's doing some post-installation setup, and this will take some time, but you're never going to have to repeat this again. Okay, now that the post-installation cleanup has been done, you're now at a very familiar login screen. It'll be presented as each time that Linux is brought up. And here we can log in as demo, which will run the demonstration for us, or we can run as guest, which is an underprivileged user account that you can use to explore the system, or you can go ahead and log in as root, which is the super user account that you will use for doing systems administration. At this point, we're going to go ahead and install X Windows. So what we need to do is log in as root. And now we simply have to type in start X. This will bring up the X Windows system, but first it's going to run through a number of dialog boxes, and we'll have to answer questions concerning what type of video card that we have, primarily concerning what type of graphics chip is on the card, what type of mouse we have, and what type of monitor we have. Now, here's a little suggestion. Let's back up from Start X here. If I do not know what type of video card or chip that I have, instead of having to tear it out of the machine, opening the machine, I can type super probe. That's with a capital S and a capital P. This utility will go ahead and try to figure out what type of video card and video chip that we have. And you see that it comes back, and it says that we have a Super VGA card, and the chipset on it is a Cirrus CLGD 5434, and it has 1024 kbytes of video memory, and it has a RAM DAC on board. You should perhaps write this information down because you'll be using it later to install X Windows. So now we're ready to go ahead and start. I know that I have a Microsoft mouse, and I'm going to be using Super VGA. So I type Start X and hit Enter. The first dialog box that's presented to us is what type of mouse that we have. We can scroll through the list, and by default we have the Microsoft Serial mouse that's been selected. That's exactly the type of a mouse that I have, so I'll just go ahead and press Return here. In this dialog box, it's going to ask where our mouse port for our Microsoft Serial mouse is going to be at. On the left-hand side, you'll see TTY S0 through S3, which matches COM1 through COM4. So my mouse is on COM1, or in the Linux world, TTY S0. And so I'll just go ahead and press OK here. If your mouse is on some other port, you would want to toggle down and select that port by hitting the space key. I'll go ahead and press OK now to select COM1. Next, it wants to know what your mouse baud rate is. Most common, if you don't know what your mouse baud rate is, it's most common for your serial mouse to be 1200 baud. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here by pressing the return key. Now here's where it comes into selecting your video card. Notice if the video card doesn't appear here, we can try selecting Other. And this information will have to be supplied by the user, and it might not work with all configurations. So if this doesn't work here, we'll go ahead and I will tell you later how to deal with any problems that happens if this doesn't work the first time through. I have a diamond card in here, and I can scroll through and see the many different types of cards that we have here. As you can see, there are many different options here that I have. But I want to go ahead and I'll select the diamond card that I have. I have a Diamond Speedstar. So I'll select OK here. And here it wants to know what video modes that I want to have available to use. Okay. Now I need to select video modes that my monitor will be capable of handling. I can find this information out by looking in the documentation that comes with my monitor. This is something that you need to pay particular attention to. If you select a video mode, like a high resolution mode, that your monitor is not capable of, you might damage your monitor. So be very, very careful with this. I happen to know that my monitor can handle the 640 by 480, the 800 by 600, so I can hit the space to toggle that option on, and the 1024 by 768. So I'll hit the space bar to toggle that on. I'll press OK. Now it wants to know what type of monitor that I have here. The monitor type that I have is not on here, so I'm going to select Other. Now the X server needs to know the monitor bandwidth. You can enter this data into here. You look for it in your monitor's documentation, but I'm going to go ahead and use the default mode, let the computer figure it out. And the horizontal frequency, I'm going to go ahead and just use default values for it also, but you can enter this information from your monitor's documentation. And the monitor the vertical frequency you'd also find from your monitor documentation. And here once again I'm going to enter just the default values by pressing OK and not entering anything. What the computer has just done, it has created what is known as an XF86 config file. And now it is attempting to bring up X windows for us. Notice that I have the cursor, the mouse cursor. It's able to move around. Therefore, I've selected the correct mouse type and mouse port. That's a good indication there. Now what's going to happen is that a number of windows are going to appear. First of all, the window manager is going to appear. This is known as FVWM. That's the F Virtual Window Manager. Some people call Fred's Virtual Window Manager. And that's the first thing that you're going to see. This is the window manager that we're going to use. There are many different window managers available under Linux. For example, TWM, GWM, and Motif. The Motif window manager is available for commercial sale. What we're going to be presented with is a number of X terminal windows. There's going to be XFM, which is the X file manager, which gives you a window in which you'll be able to do drag and drop and various administration functions. You'll be presented this control panel. Okay, here's the file manager, and here's an application manager. The file manager I can navigate through my directories with. And this is a very highly customizable environment. This file manager window, along with this applications window, is part of what is called the XFM, and it is highly configurable. So you need to see the documentation on that. What's important at this time is the control panel. This is very unique to the Yggdrasil installation program. As you can see here, we have the name of our machine, and we can name a mail server up here, a news server I should say, and down here are various buttons to accomplish various administration tasks. For example, if I click on this button, the optional software packages will come up. I'm able to administer networking very simply by clicking on this button. Doing a serial internet connection brings up a form which allows me to do a slip connection by simply filling out the information in the form and clicking on the OK button. I'll be able to set up a slip connection very easily. I'll bring up this form at the present time. You see right here we can set up a serial internet link, a slip connection, very simply by entering the phone number, the address of the remote end link, the address of our link, what serial port we're going to use by calling out, what modem that we're going to be using, in other words the modem port, the baud rate that we want to communicate at, the login prompt, our username, password, etc. like that. If I just go ahead and set save right there, this will go ahead and build the files that will allow me to, when I log onto my machine, I turn my machine on, because of the activate serial connection at boot, when I turn on the machine, it'll go ahead and dial into my internet provider and set up a serial link, a serial internet link via slip to my internet. So I'll be right onto the internet as soon as I log in. Another thing that I can do is I can easily configure my printers by bringing up a printer dialog. Here I can go ahead and name where my printer port is. Notice that I get online help in the pink area here for each thing that I do. I can do a remote printer, and then I can select what type of printer that I have through this scrolling list of printers. All I have to do is merely select which one, and it will go ahead and set up my print files for me. One of the most important buttons on this control panel is the optional software packages. If I click on this button, this is what brings up the form of all the optional software that I can install from the CD-ROM onto my hard drive. The reason that I want to do that is that it will cause the software to run faster instead of having to run it directly from the CD-ROM drive. So here's the window that we're going to bring up, and it shows a number of icons on here. If I go to any of the icons, you'll notice at the top there is an explanation of what that icon is for. For example, I go over to editors. It's the parent component for text editor programs such as Emacs and VI. There's games, sound, administration, development tools, etc. You can go explore any of these at your leisure. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at the COM programs. What I can do here is I can install the whole package by simply clicking on that package, or what I can do is I can select individual programs to install by double clicking on the icon, and it will take us and show exactly what is available under the COM communications package. We have eFax, which bringing the cursor over to any of the packages will show you at the top exactly what is in that package or what the function of that package is. Let's take a look at eFax. It's a program to send and receive faxes through a fax modem. If we want to install that, we just have to simply click on that. Minicom. Minicom is a telex-style terminal program that can be used to dial out on a serial line. That's very useful. So this is what we can go ahead and use to install these packages with. Here's Lynx, which is a text-based World Wide Web browser. Very nice. When we're done selecting and installing various options, we can go back to the main control panel. Installation for the optional software packages by simply clicking on the arrow. And we're going to be back again, once again, to the main window for optional software. Let's go ahead and look at, for example, development tools. We can double click on development tools, and you'll see all the icons for various development tools. Let's go ahead and look at tools for debugging. I can go ahead and double click on that, and it'll bring up all the different debuggers. So here's, for example, electric fence, expect, gnats, deja nu, the popular GDB, and strace. These are all programs that you can install. So this is how you explore the packages that you want to see that are available and how to install them by just simply clicking on them, or by passing the cursor over the icon. It will give you the information of exactly what the program is for, what it does. Here's emulators, which will allow you to install like the DOS emulator, the Microsoft Windows emulator, or the IBCS2 Unix systems emulator. These are very powerful tools that are available to you. So feel free to investigate, to double click on these, to determine what you want to install onto your system, to customize the system for yourself. And basically that's it. That's exactly what you want to accomplish. This is exactly what you want to do with your Linux system, is to customize the system for your needs. And this control panel gives you that capability. So when I'm done doing whatever I want, I can save or I can quit from here. Under the XFM file manager, I can go and I can select applications. For example, I'll select my printer. I can drop documents onto my printer to print, etc. So full drag and drop. I can read my mail by double clicking on my mail utility. It'll bring up Xmail. If I had mail, if I have mail configured, I can go ahead and do my mail from here. And there are many utilities. This is highly customizable. You can customize it to exactly what you want it to do. It's very easy. In the back of the Yggdrasil installation distribution manual there is a copy of exactly what all the programs available are and the descriptions of them. So this basically ends this portion of the installation process and setting up X Windows using the Yggdrasil distribution.